It started on a normal day that didn't feel special at all. The sky was pale, the air was quiet, and the world seemed calm, like it was slowly breathing. In a small town where everyone mostly knew everyone, two lives were about to cross paths without even knowing it would matter. He was the kind of person who liked simple things. He didn't talk too much, didn't try too hard to impress anyone, and didn't believe in big dreams. Most of his happiness came from small moments like warm tea in the morning, quiet streets, and peaceful evenings. He worked part-time at a small local bookstore that smelled like old pages and wooden shelves. He liked that place because it felt safe and calm. She was different, but in a gentle way. She had a quiet smile and eyes that looked thoughtful, like she was always thinking about something deeper. She worked at a nearby craft shop, selling handmade cards, small decorations, and little gifts. She liked making things with her hands and believed that small things could make people feel happy. They had seen each other before, but never really noticed. Just passing faces in a crowd, nothing more. Until that day, he was walking back from work, holding a small paper bag with his lunch leftovers. He wasn't in a hurry. He was looking down at the ground, lost in his thoughts about nothing and everything. She was walking from the opposite side of the road, holding a box full of handmade items she planned to deliver to a customer. The moment happened in seconds. He stepped forward without noticing her. She stepped sideways without seeing him. The box slipped from her hands. Small paper cards, ribbons, tiny wooden pieces, and threads scattered across the road like little pieces of someone's effort suddenly thrown into the world. Both of them froze for a second. "I'm so sorry," he said quickly. Kneeling down before she even spoke, she shook her head lightly. "It's okay. It was my fault too." They both started gathering the scattered items. Their hands reached for the same ribbon at the same time. They both pulled back slightly, almost laughing without actually laughing. There was a silence, but it wasn't awkward. It felt calm. He noticed her hands were shaking a little. She noticed his hands were careful, like he was afraid to break anything. "Are these hard to make?" he asked while handing her a small paper flower. She looked surprised by the question. "Some are, especially when you want them to look simple," he nodded. "Simple things are usually the hardest." For a moment they just looked at each other. Not in a strange way, not in a dramatic way. Just like two people who suddenly felt that something about this moment felt gentle. They finished putting everything back in the box. The world around them kept moving. Cars passed, people walked by, but for some reason, it felt like they were standing in a quiet bubble. "Thank you for helping," she said softly. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. They both stood up, a little unsure of what to say next. It felt like that moment was meant to end quietly. She adjusted the box in her arms. "Have a good day, you two," he said. And just like that, they walked in opposite directions. He thought it was just another small moment in a normal day, but something felt different. He felt lighter, like the day had suddenly gained a little color. Later that evening, he found himself thinking about it. Not in a strange way, just a simple thought. The scattered ribbons, the careful way she held the box, the calm voice. He shook his head slightly, smiling to himself. "Why am I thinking about that?" He whispered. On the other side of town, she placed the box on her work table. Some of the items were slightly bent, but still usable. As she fixed them, she found herself remembering how quickly he had kneeled down, how gentle he had been. She pressed a ribbon flat and smiled softly without realizing it. The next day, something strange happened. They crossed paths again. This time, it was outside the small cafe near the bookstore. He was standing there holding a cup of tea, waiting for it to cool. She was walking past, looking down at her phone. They both stopped at the same time. "You," she said, sounding surprised. "Hi," he replied. A small silence followed, but it felt warm. "How are your, handmade things?" he asked, clearly not knowing what to call them. She laughed lightly. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft laugh that seemed real. "They survived," she said. "Thanks to you." He felt slightly embarrassed. I didn't do much. You did, she said simply. They stood there for a few seconds that felt longer than they were. Do you live around here? She asked. Yeah, he said, pointing behind him. I work at the bookstore. She looked slightly interested. That must be nice. Quiet. It is, he said. Sometimes too quiet. She nodded. The craft shop can be loud when children come in. They both smiled at that. There was something different about this conversation. It wasn't forced. It wasn't awkward. It felt comfortable, like talking to someone you somehow already knew. Before leaving, he gathered courage. Maybe. If you ever need help carrying your things, he said slowly, you can ask. She looked surprised, then smiled. Maybe I will, she said. That night, the town slept quietly, unaware that something small had started. Nothing big, nothing loud, just a soft beginning. Two strangers who were no longer completely strangers. Two quiet hearts that had started to notice each other, and a story that had taken its first breath. It didn't feel planned. It just started happening. After that short talk outside the cafe, their paths began crossing more often, like the town itself was quietly helping. Sometimes it happened in front of the bookstore, sometimes near the craft shop, and sometimes at the small park where people sat on old wooden benches and watched birds hop around. At first, it was just short greetings, a small smile, a quiet hi, a simple how's your day. Nothing big, nothing dramatic, but even small things can grow. One afternoon, he was sitting inside the bookstore at a small wooden table. A few books were placed in front of him, but he wasn't really reading. He was just flipping pages slowly, letting time pass. The bell above the door rang softly. He didn't look up right away. Hope this isn't strange, a soft voice said. He looked up. It was her. She stood near the door, holding a small paper bag in her hand. Her fingers were folded tightly around the handle like she was nervous. No, it's not strange, he said. You can come in. She walked closer, looking around. It smells like old paper and wood, she said. He smiled slightly. That's my favorite part. She held the bag out. I had extra cookies at the shop. I thought. Maybe you'd like some. He looked surprised. You didn't have to. I wanted to, she said simply. He took the bag gently. Thank you. They sat at the table. Not too close. Not too far. Just comfortable. They talked about simple things. About books he liked. Even though he said he wasn't a big reader. About small gifts she liked to make. About how quiet the town felt at night. About how empty streets sometimes felt peaceful and lonely at the same time. She listened carefully when he spoke. He listened carefully when she spoke. There was no pressure to be funny or smart. They were just real. A few days later, he helped her carry a box of supplies from the shop to her home. The box wasn't very heavy, but she still appreciated the help. They walked slowly, side by side, not trying to make the moment bigger than it was. At least now I don't look silly carrying this alone, she said. Half smiling, you never look silly, he replied softly, then quickly looked away. Hoping she didn't notice he said too much, she noticed, but she didn't say anything. From that day, it became a small routine. He helped her when she had work to carry. She sometimes brought him tea, sometimes biscuits, sometimes just stories about strange customers. He liked listening. She liked talking. One evening, they sat on a park bench. The sun was going down slowly, painting the sky in soft orange and pink. There were only a few people around. The town felt calm, like it was taking a slow breath. Do you ever feel like life is just passing? She asked quietly. He thought for a moment. Sometimes. It scares me a little, she said. He looked at her. What scares you? That one day I'll wake up and nothing will feel special anymore. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss it. He nodded slowly. I feel that too. She looked relieved, like someone finally understood a thought she never said out loud before. Seconds passed in silence. But it wasn't empty silence. It was the kind of quiet that felt full. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into small memories. They started sharing little pieces of their lives. He told her how he used to feel lonely when he first moved to the town. She told him how she sometimes felt invisible, even when people talked to her. Neither of them judged, neither of them tried to fix things, they just listened. One rainy afternoon, the sky opened up suddenly. Streets flooded quickly. People ran for shelter. They ended up standing under the small roof of a clothes shop. Rain pouring hard in front of them. They laughed without trying to stop it. "You look wet," she said. Smiling, "So do you," he replied. Water dripped from their hair. Shoes soaked. But somehow, neither of them cared. They stood close, not touching, but aware of each other in a way that felt new. For a moment, everything else disappeared. Then, slowly, they both stepped back, not because they didn't want to be close, but because they didn't understand the feeling yet. That night, he lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. Why does she feel so familiar? He thought. He wasn't scared, just confused. She sat near her window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. Why do I feel safe around him? She wondered. Her heart felt calm, and that scared her a little. The next day, something small but powerful happened. A stranger saw them walking together and said lightly, "You two look nice together." They both froze. He felt his face heat up. She looked down. Neither of them said anything, but that sentence stayed with them that evening. They walked a little slower than usual there. Shoulders almost touched. Almost. They didn't notice when walking side by side started to feel natural. They didn't notice when silence stopped feeling awkward. They didn't notice when their smiles became softer around each other, but their hearts noticed. They just didn't have the courage to admit it yet, and slowly, their simple friendship started turning into something that felt different, warmer, deeper, even if they didn't have a name for it. Days passed. The quiet town seemed unchanged, yet something between them had begun to shift. Their friendship, once simple and easy, was starting to carry a weight neither of them fully understood. They still laughed together, still helped each other with small tasks, but every glance, every smile, felt charged with something deeper. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was there like a soft song playing just below the surface of daily life. He noticed it first on a Sunday morning when the bookstore was quiet. A few customers came and went, but for the most part, he had the place to himself. He was stacking books when she appeared at the door, carrying a small paper bag and smiling like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. He realized suddenly that he had been looking forward to seeing her more than he'd admit, more than he'd even allowed himself to think. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied, trying to sound casual. But his voice didn't quite match his calm expression. He felt a little too aware of her presence. She walked closer and placed the bag on the counter. "I made some tea bread. It's nothing special." He shook his head, smiling. "Nothing special is often the best thing." She laughed quietly. There was a sound to her laughter that made him feel like the sun had just peeked through the clouds. They spent the next hour talking.
About nothing in particular books.
Small town news. A cat that liked to sit on the windowsill, but even in those ordinary conversations, the tension of unspoken feelings grew. Every time he looked at her, he caught himself imagining holding her hand, guiding her through the streets when it rained, or just sitting close on a quiet evening without saying a word. He quickly pushed those thoughts away, unsure why his heart had suddenly started paying so much attention. She too felt it. There were moments when she would catch herself staring at him, thinking about his quiet smile, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, or the gentle way he treated everyone around him. But she didn't dare say anything. She feared that speaking aloud what she felt could ruin the delicate balance they had built. Weeks passed, and the unspoken feelings grew heavier. They became aware of each other in ways that were impossible to ignore. A simple brush of hands when passing an item in the shop caused both of them to freeze for a fraction of a second. A shared laugh over a minor mistake felt like an electric current running through the room. They were learning each other's habits, small gestures, and unspoken words, and it was both thrilling and terrifying. One rainy afternoon, she was walking home from the craft shop, carrying a small delivery she had to make. The streets were slippery, and she struggled to keep her balance while holding the package. Just as she stumbled, he appeared from the side street, umbrella in hand. "Careful," he said quickly, extending a hand to steady her. Her cheeks warmed as she took it. "Thanks, I didn't see you there." "You never do," he replied with a soft smile. There was a pause, long enough for her to feel a strange flutter in her chest. The rain fell steadily around them, but neither of them moved away from each other. The world seemed to pause, leaving only the two of them and the soft patter of raindrops. For the first time, they both felt the weight of what they hadn't said. She wanted to speak, to tell him that she felt the same pull he seemed to feel, but fear held her back. Fear of rejection, fear of changing the comfortable friendship they had. So, instead, she just nodded and let him guide her across the street, their hands brushing briefly. The touch was small, almost accidental, but it was enough to send a quiet tremor through both of them. That evening, he couldn't stop thinking about the moment. Every small detail replayed in his mind, the way her fingers had briefly met his, the slight tilt of her head as she smiled, the quiet hum of the rain. He realized that his feelings had grown far beyond friendship. The realization was both exciting and frightening. She, too, lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. She had never imagined that someone could make her feel so understood without saying much at all. She tried to convince herself that it was just friendship, but the heart is hard to fool. Deep down, she knew she wanted more. Even if she wasn't ready to admit it, the days that followed were filled with a quiet tension neither of them could name. They continued their routines, meeting at the bookstore, walking together, sharing small laughs, but every moment carried the invisible weight of unspoken feelings. Sometimes, she would catch him looking at her for just a second too long. Sometimes, he would notice her gaze lingering when she thought he wasn't paying attention. It was a delicate dance, a silent game of emotions neither was ready to play openly. One evening, the town held a small festival in the main square. There were lights strung above the streets, music playing softly, and children running with colorful balloons. They found themselves walking together among the crowd, each step making their hearts beat a little faster. "Do you ever wonder if life is supposed to be like this?" she asked quietly, not looking at him. He glanced at her. "Like what?" "Like quiet, simple, but full of things you feel but don't say," she said, her voice barely above the music and laughter. He nodded slowly, understanding her without needing further explanation. "I think maybe it is," he said. They walked in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. The festival lights reflected in her eyes, and he felt a pang of something he couldn't yet name. Longing, hope, fear, all tangled together. A little later, they found a quiet corner near a small fountain. The sound of water was soft, the world around them slightly dimmer than the bright festival lights. He turned to her, almost unconsciously, and she met his gaze. For a brief moment, the words they had been holding back trembled on their lips. He wanted to say it. He wanted to tell her that he couldn't imagine these days without her. She wanted to say it too, to tell him that she felt the same pull he seemed to feel every time they were together. But the fear was too strong. So instead, they simply sat there, side by side, letting the quiet speak for them. The night ended, and they walked home separately, each lost in thought. Neither slept well. Every small detail from the evening kept replaying in their minds: the brush of hands, the soft laugh, the way their eyes had met and lingered. It was becoming impossible to ignore the truth. Over the next few weeks, the tension grew. Every shared meal, every small favor, every quiet walk became a reminder that their friendship was no longer simple. Their hearts were pulling them closer, but their lips remained silent. One afternoon, she found herself staring at a small gift he had left on her doorstep, books she had mentioned wanting to read weeks ago. She held it close, feeling the weight of his thoughtfulness. At the same time, he walked home from the bookstore, replaying the moment he had slipped it into her hands. Wondering if she had guessed how he felt, they were both aware of the growing love between them. Yet neither dared to speak it aloud. It was hidden in gestures, in glances, in quiet moments that passed like soft music in the background of their lives. And so, life continued, delicate and fragile, filled with unspoken words and quiet longing. They were learning each other's hearts without ever saying the words that would change everything. Each day brought them closer, though neither fully realized it. The love was there, hidden but undeniable, and soon circumstances would force them to confront it, whether they were ready or not. It was a day that neither of them would forget, though at the time they had no way of knowing it. The morning began like any other, with soft sunlight filtering through the windows of the town, birds chirping in the quiet streets, and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of freshly baked bread from the bakery down the road. Yet something felt different. There was a weight in the air, subtle but undeniable, like the world itself was preparing for a change. He was at the bookstore, arranging new arrivals on the shelves. His mind, however, was elsewhere. Thoughts of her kept creeping in, making him frown without realizing it. Every small memory of Hertha, way she smiled when she laughed. The careful way she handled things, the quiet warmth she carried was vivid in his mind. He tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. He wanted to see her, to talk to her, to feel her near him. Meanwhile, she was at the craft shop, preparing a delivery for a client who lived across town. She had packed the items carefully, tied ribbons around them, and checked the box twice to make sure everything was secure. Yet even as she worked, her thoughts wandered to him. She thought about the little ways he had made her feel noticed, the quiet gestures that had stayed with her, the way her heart seemed to beat a little faster whenever he was near. She tried to push the feelings aside, telling herself it was just friendship. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Their paths crossed that afternoon in a way neither expected. She had taken the longer route home to deliver the package when she saw a crowd gathered near the town square. Curiosity pulled her closer. When she arrived, she saw him helping a small child who had fallen off a bicycle. His hands were steady, his voice gentle, full of concern. She watched silently, feeling a strange warmth in her chest as she noticed how naturally he cared for others. When the child's parent arrived, thanking him repeatedly, he turned and noticed her standing at the edge of the crowd. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink. The noise of the square faded, leaving only the quiet connection between them. "You always find yourself helping everyone, don't you?" she asked softly as he approached. He shrugged, smiling lightly. "I don't know. I just try to do what I can. Always do it well," she said, her voice gentle. He felt a warmth in his chest at her words, something deeper than he had expected. They walked together silently for a few minutes, neither of them speaking much, both aware of the tension that had been building for weeks. It was a tension neither fully understood. Both could feel it like a humming under the skin, impossible to ignore. The unexpected incident happened shortly after. A small fire broke out in one of the shops nearby. People screamed and ran as smoke began to fill the street. He reacted instantly, helping to guide people away from danger. While she froze for a moment, fear gripping her, he noticed her standing too close to the edge of the commotion and rushed to her side. "Stay here," he said firmly. Taking her hand and guiding her behind a safe barrier, her heart raced not just from fear, but from being so close to him. She felt the warmth of his hand around hers, the steadying force of his presence, and it made her realize just how much she depended on him, more than she had ever admitted. When the fire was under control and the smoke cleared, they found themselves alone on a quiet street, away from the chaos. Both were breathing heavily, but it wasn't just from the excitement. It was the intensity of the moment, the closeness, the unspoken feelings that had suddenly become impossible to ignore. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and filled with concern. She nodded, but her eyes betrayed her nerves. I think so." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in him shifted. All the moments of hesitation, all the unspoken words, all the quiet longing, they were too strong to ignore any longer. "I don't want to keep this inside anymore," he said suddenly, his voice trembling slightly. She froze. Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, though she already had an inkling of the answer, I mean. I like you, he admitted, the words spilling out before he could stop them. More than just a friend. I've tried to ignore it, but I can't. I need you to know. Her eyes widened, her chest tightening. She had felt the same way for weeks, months even, but fear had kept her silent. Fear of losing what they already had, fear of change. But now, hearing him speak, she felt a flood of relief, joy, and fear all at once. I feel the same, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I've been afraid of saying it, afraid it would ruin everything. He smiled softly, a mixture of relief and happiness. It won't ruin anything, he said. It will just change everything in a good way. For the first time, they didn't need to hide their feelings. They stood there in the quiet street, hands brushing, hearts beating fast, words no longer necessary. The fear that had held them back melted away, leaving only a new sense of closeness, a new understanding of what they meant to each other. The days that followed were filled with a new kind of energy. Every conversation, every gesture, every shared glance carried the warmth of their confession. They no longer had to guess, no longer had to wonder. The unspoken feelings were now spoken, and the weight that had pressed on their hearts was lifted yet. Even with the confession, life continued with its usual rhythm. Work at the bookstore, deliveries from the craft shop, quiet walks through the town. Everything was the same on the surface, but beneath it all, everything had changed. Their friendship had grown into something deeper, richer, and more meaningful. Every shared smile now carried a secret, every touch a promise. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft pink and gold, they walked together along the quiet streets. The town was peaceful, the air cool and fresh, and the moment felt perfect. I never thought I could feel this way, she said softly. Glancing at him, me neither, he replied, squeezing her hand gently. But I'm glad I do. They walked in silence for a while, content to let the world fade around them. It was a simple kind of happiness, quiet and unassuming, but it felt real, stronger than anything they had ever felt before. That night, they both lay awake, hearts full of a new kind of hope. The confession had changed everything, yes, but it had also brought clarity. They knew now that they belonged in each other's lives in a way that was undeniable, unshakable, and beautiful. And so, life continued. The town remained quiet, the streets calm, the sun rising and setting in its usual rhythm, but for them nothing would ever be the same again. They had crossed the threshold from friendship into love, and the world felt brighter, softer, and infinitely more alive. It was a moment neither of them would ever forget, a moment of fear, of honesty, of vulnerability, and it had brought them to a place they had both longed for without realizing it. Their hearts were finally open, and the love that had been growing quietly for so long could now flourish freely. Without hesitation or fear, from the moment they admitted their feelings, their lives took on a quiet, steady rhythm. Love, in their case, wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't filled with grand gestures or constant excitement. It was soft, patient, and real, a love built on understanding, care. And small moments that mattered more than words ever could. They spent days walking through the town, hand in hand, discovering new places together and noticing things they had never seen before. Even the familiar streets seemed brighter, softer, alive with their shared presence. Simple acts became special, the way he would hold the door for her, the way she would leave small notes for him to find in the bookstore, the way they would laugh over stories from their childhood or small misadventures in daily life. One afternoon, they decided to visit a small hill on the edge of town. From there, they could see the rooftops, the winding streets, and the soft glow of the sunset. They sat quietly, shoulders brushing, letting the world unfold beneath them. Neither felt the need to fill the silence with words. Their hearts spoke in a language only they understood. It feels different now, she said softly, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. How? He asked, his hand gently brushing her hair. Everything feels like it belongs. Like we belong, she said. He nodded, pressing a light kiss to the top of her head. I've wanted this for so long. And now that it's here, it's more than I imagined. They laughed softly, feeling a mix of relief and happiness. For years, they had walked close to each other without fully understanding what their hearts wanted. Now, everything felt clear. The love that had been quiet, patient, and cautious could finally be embraced. Life, of course, wasn't perfect. They had challenges, days when the world seemed heavy or work became stressful. Sometimes small misunderstandings arose, but the difference now was how they faced them. They listened. They spoke gently. They chose understanding over pride, compassion over frustration. Their love had a foundation strong enough to hold them steady through the storms. Seasons changed, and with them, their bond deepened. Winter brought quiet evenings by the fireplace, sharing stories and hot drinks, hands intertwined and hearts warm. Spring brought blossoms and fresh air, long walks in the park, and shared laughter over small adventures. Summer brought sunlight and the soft scent of flowers, lazy afternoons in the sun, and evenings filled with quiet conversations under the sky. Autumn brought crisp air, falling leaves, and cozy moments in small cafes, holding each other close. Through every season, they discovered new ways to care, new ways to support, new ways to simply be together. They also learned the power of small gestures. A cup of tea waiting for the other in the morning. A favorite book left on the table. A quiet message that said, "I'm thinking of you." Those little things, unnoticed by the world, spoke louder than any grand declaration. They knew that love wasn't about spectacle. It was about consistency, thoughtfulness, and presence. One rainy day, they found themselves caught in the storm without an umbrella. They ran to the nearest shelter, laughing as water soaked their clothes. Instead of rushing past, they stopped in the middle of the street, letting the rain pour over them. Their laughter mixed with the sound of water hitting the ground, pure, shared joy that made them feel alive in a way nothing else could. In that moment, they didn't care about getting wet or looking silly. They only cared about being together, feeling each other's presence in a world that often moved too fast. Years passed. They moved into a small home at the edge of town, simple and unassuming, filled with the things that mattered most: books, handmade decorations, memories, and laughter. Friends would visit, comment on the warmth and peace in the house. But the real magic was in the quiet, ordinary life they shared. Breakfasts together, evening walks, shared chores. Soft conversations by candlelight, these were the moments that defined their love. Even as the years went by, the spark never dimmed. They still noticed each other in small ways: the way he brushed her hair from her face when she was reading, the way she smiled when he brought her coffee just the way she liked it. They still held hands when walking, still shared quiet jokes, still made time for each other no matter how busy life became. The small town around them remained familiar, unchanged in its routines, yet their world within it felt endlessly new. There were moments of reflection, too. Sometimes sitting together in the quiet of their home, they would talk about the journey that brought them here at the chance meeting, the scattered papers, the days of hidden feelings. The moment they finally admitted their love, they would laugh at how long it had taken, shake their heads in disbelief, and then smile, knowing that every step had been worth it. Every hesitation, every silence, every small gesture had led them to a love that was real, steady, and unshakable. Family and friends watched their bond grow with admiration. People often said how rare it was to see such a quiet, enduring love in a world full of rush and noise. But to them, it was natural. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It wasn't about grand declarations or dramatic displays. It was about being there, fully and genuinely, for each other every single day. Even as they grew older, their love remained a constant. Wrinkles formed, hair turned gray, steps slowed, but the warmth in their hearts never faded. They would sit together on the porch, hands clasped, watching the world move on around them. And in those moments, they often didn't need to speak. Their eyes, their smiles, their quiet presence said everything. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks, they sat in their garden, surrounded by flowers they had planted together over the years. She rested her head on his shoulder and he kissed the top of her hair. Do you remember the first day we met? She asked softly. He smiled, nodding. I do. The papers on the street. You looked so worried and well, I didn't know it would change my life. She laughed quietly. Neither did I. They sat in silence for a while, holding hands, feeling the comfort and warmth of a love that had grown slowly, carefully, and beautifully. They didn't need grand words or dramatic moments anymore. They had something rare, a life shared, a love built on understanding, patience, and endless care. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, twinkling softly above, they knew one thing clearly: their love wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. It had survived hesitation, fear, and the quiet tests of time. It had grown stronger with each passing day, deeper than either had ever imagined. In that small, quiet town, two hearts had found each other. They had walked together through chance encounters, friendship, hidden feelings, confessions, and finally, a life built on love. A love that was patient. A love that was real. A love that would last no matter what. And that love, simple and unassuming as it was, became a story worth remembering, a story of two people who, against the quiet rhythms of life, found each other and chose to stay together. Hand in hand, heart with heart, forever. Life, as it continued for them, was full of quiet moments that held more meaning than any grand adventure. By now, the two of them had grown into a rhythm that felt natural. Their days were filled with simple routines, shared laughter, small surprises, and a deep sense of comfort in each other's presence. But even in this calm, everyday life, the world had a way of testing them, reminding them that love was not only about joy, it was also about patience, understanding, and growth. One morning, he woke early, as usual, the soft sunlight filtering through the window and casting a golden glow across the room. She was still asleep, breathing gently beside him. He watched her for a moment, noticing the way her hair fell across her face, small rise and fall of her chest, the peaceful expression she wore. He smiled quietly, feeling gratitude in his heart for having her in his life. This quiet appreciation, he realized, was part of love too, the way it could fill a simple morning with warmth. Later that day, they walked through the town together, stopping at the market to pick up a few things for the week. They talked about small matters: what to cook for dinner, which flowers to plant in the garden, a book one of them wanted to read, but underneath the ordinary. Conversation was a comfort that had grown over years of shared moments. Every glance, every laugh, every touch felt like a small reaffirmation of the bond they had built. During their walk, they came across a little girl struggling to carry a small bag of groceries. Without hesitation, he went to help her, lifting the bag with ease. While she knelt beside the girl, offering a reassuring smile and kind words, he caught her eye as they helped, and they shared a quiet laugh. These small acts, these moments of care, reminded them of the importance of kindness in a world that often rushed past people in need. It was a lesson they had learned together, quietly, over time. That evening, they returned home to prepare dinner. Cooking had become one of their shared pleasures. Sometimes they laughed at small mistakes, sometimes they tried new recipes, and sometimes they simply cooked quietly, letting the act itself be a way to connect. As they chopped vegetables and stirred sauces, they shared memories of their early days together, the chance meeting on the street, the scattered papers, the first moments of recognition, the long silence before their feelings were spoken. They laughed, reminiscing, and also felt a gentle warmth at how far they had come. After dinner, they sat together by the fireplace. The flames cast flickering shadows across the room, creating a cozy atmosphere. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her. Words were not necessary. The comfort of their closeness, the steady beat of shared hearts, and the silence of a world that felt safe in their presence spoke more than any conversation ever could. Weeks passed, and seasons changed. Autumn brought crisp air and falling leaves. Winter brought quiet, snow-covered streets. Spring brought blooming flowers and soft rain. And summer brought long days and golden light. Each season, they discovered new joys in the small things, picking flowers, reading together in the garden, walking through the town in the gentle warmth of the sun, or simply sitting in quiet reflection. Every moment, however ordinary, became meaningful because it was shared. One day, they decided to take a trip beyond their small town. They didn't need a grand destination. They simply wanted to see new places together, to walk new streets, and to experience the world as a pair. They wandered through small villages, explored markets, and walked along quiet riverbanks. Noticing details others might overlook, the laughter, the quiet conversations, and the shared discoveries made the journey memorable. But it was the presence of each other that made it extraordinary. During this trip, they faced small challenges too. They got lost in winding streets, missed a bus, and struggled to communicate in a village where few spoke their language. But even in these moments of frustration, their love showed its strength. They supported each other with patience, made each other laugh, and found joy in navigating the difficulties together. They realized that love wasn't just about perfect moments. It was also about facing challenges side by side and choosing understanding over irritation. Upon returning home, they began planning small celebrations for the milestones in their lives. Birthdays, anniversaries, and simple victories were occasions to honor each other and the life they had built together. These celebrations were never extravagant, but they were filled with thoughtfulness. A favorite meal, a small handmade gift, a quiet note. These gestures carried more love than anything grand could. It was in these acts, small but sincere, that they found the true meaning of togetherness. Even as years passed, they made time to nurture each other's dreams. She continued her craft work, exploring new ideas and creating with her hands, while he devoted himself to the bookstore, cued introducing new books and helping the town discover stories they might have missed. They celebrated each other's successes, offered support in moments of doubt, and reminded each other of their worth. Their love was not about changing each other, but about lifting each other quietly and consistently. One afternoon, while sitting in their garden surrounded by flowers and soft sunlight, she turned to him and said, "I never imagined life could feel like this." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Like what?" "Like full. Full of simple happiness. Full of comfort. Full of love that doesn't need to be loud." He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "It is full, and it's ours." They shared a quiet moment, holding hands and looking at the world around them. Life had not always been easy. They had faced hesitation, fear, uncertainty, and the slow passage of time. Yet, through it all, they had chosen each other again and again, building a love that was steady, enduring, and real. As the sun set that evening, casting long golden shadows across their home, they reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a chance meeting to hesitant friendship, to hidden feelings, to confession, and finally to a life intertwined with care and understanding. They realized that love was not just a feeling, it was a choice, made every day, in every action, in every word. And in every silence, their story, though quiet and simple, became a testament to the beauty of patience, trust, and shared hearts. They understood that love did not need to be dramatic or grand to be meaningful. Its strength lay in the everyday moments, the laughter, the support, the gestures, and the quiet understanding that grew over time, years later. As they sat together on a bench in the park where they had shared so many walks, they watched children play, couples pass by, and the town continue its gentle rhythm. They held hands, comfortable in the silence, hearts full of gratitude. They had lived a life together built on love that had been tested by time and strengthened by care. It was a love that had grown quietly, patiently, and beautifully, one that had survived the ordinary, celebrated the small, and cherished the shared. And in that quiet, ordinary world, they found the extraordinary, each other. Their love story, simple yet profound, became a reminder that the most beautiful love is not always the one with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It is the love that endures, that grows, that is patient, kind, and steadfast. The love that listens, supports, and chooses to be present every day. It is a love that does not need to shout to be heard, because its strength is felt in every glance, every touch, every quiet moment shared between two hearts that have chosen to walk together, hand in hand, through life forever. And so, they continued, living each day fully, loving each other deeply, and finding beauty in the simplicity of life shared. Their story, a gentle testament to enduring love, left a quiet impression on everyone who knew them, reminding all that the truest love is patient, real, and everlasting.